March 1952. A white hotel owner slaps a black man across the face and throws him into the street like garbage. That man was Bumpy Johnson, the most dangerous mind in New York. Standing on that corner with blood on his face, Bumpy makes one promise. 48 hours, I'll own this hotel. Can one man with zero legal ownership actually seize a $340,000 empire in just 2 days to understand how it all led here? We go back to where it truly began. March 15th, 1952, 6:47 in the evening, downtown Manhattan. Bumpy Johnson stood on the corner of 47th and Broadway, perfectly still. Around him, his luggage lay scattered across the wet pavement like garbage thrown from a moving truck. A leather suitcase had burst open, spilling white dress shirts into a puddle. His shaving kit had rolled into the gutter. His expensive shoes, the ones he'd bought just last week from that Italian cobbler on Mulberry Street, sat in a pile near the curb. He didn't move to pick anything up. He just stood there, statue still, stone cold. His expensive suit was wrinkled now. There was blood on his collar, a thin line of red running from the corner of his mouth down to his chin. People walked past. Some stared. Some looked away quickly. A few whispered to each other. Nobody stopped to help. Nobody asked if he was all right. This was 1952. This was downtown Manhattan, and Bumpy Johnson was a black man standing in front of a white hotel with his belongings scattered in the street. They all knew what that meant. 5 minutes earlier, inside the Dixie Hotel lobby, everything had been different. Bumpy had walked through those front doors with confidence, head high, shoulders back, the kind of walk that said he belonged anywhere he chose to be. He'd been traveling for business. He needed a room, simple as that. A clean bed, a hot shower, a place to conduct his affairs in private. The lobby was all marble and crystal, chandeliers hanging from high ceilings, thick carpets that swallowed the sound of footsteps, the kind of place that screamed money and respectability. The front desk clerk had looked up from his register when Bumpy approached. Young kid, maybe 22, with slicked back hair and a nervous smile. The smile disappeared the moment he saw Bumpy's face. "I need a room," Bumpy had said calmly. "2 nights. I'll pay cash up front." The clerk's eyes had darted left, then right. His hand reached for the phone. Let me get the manager." Bumpy had expected this. He'd been refused service before. Restaurants, hotels, clubs. This was America in 1952. Segregation wasn't just the law in the South. It was the practice everywhere. The difference was that up north, they were quieter about it, more polite. But what happened next wasn't polite. Gerald Mitchell emerged from the back office like a bull charging into an arena, heavy-set, red-faced, white hair slicked back with too much pomade. He wore a cheap suit that barely contained his gut, and his tie was loose around his thick neck. Everything about him screamed old money pretending to be new class. Mitchell didn't even look at Bumpy's face. He looked at his skin, and something dark rose to the surface in his eyes. "We don't serve your kind here," Mitchell had said, not quietly, not discreetly, loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "This is a respectable establishment." Bumpy hadn't argued. He'd simply nodded, picked up his bags, and turned toward the door. But Mitchell wasn't done. As Bumpy walked toward the exit, Mitchell grabbed his arm. Rough, aggressive, the kind of grab that said, "I own you." Bumpy stopped, looked down at the hand gripping his suit jacket, then looked up at Mitchell's face. "Don't touch me," Bumpy said quietly. Mitchell's response was to shove him. Hard. Hard enough that Bumpy stumbled forward. Hard enough that people in the lobby gasped. Then Mitchell did something worse. He slapped Bumpy across the face, open-handed. The sound echoed through the marble lobby like a gunshot. Bumpy's head snapped to the side. Blood appeared at the corner of his mouth where Mitchell's ring had cut the skin. "Get out, you black monkey," Mitchell snarled, spit flying from his lips. "Get the hell out of my hotel before I have you arrested for trespassing." Two bellhops appeared, white kids in red uniforms. They grabbed Bumpy's luggage and hurled it through the front doors into the street. The bags hit the pavement hard. One burst open. The other rolled into traffic. A taxi swerved, the driver laying on his horn. Bumpy walked out of that hotel with blood on his face and his dignity scattered across Broadway. The doorman held the door open with a smirk. Mitchell stood in the center of the lobby, chest puffed out, looking like he'd just won a war. The crowd in the lobby watched. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked away. A few smiled. Now Bumpy stood on the street corner, looking at his scattered belongings. A woman in a fur coat stepped over his shaving kit without breaking stride. A businessman in a gray suit kicked one of his shoes out of the way. Nobody helped. Nobody said a word. Bumpy reached up slowly and wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked at the red smear on his dark skin. Then he looked back at the hotel. Through the glass doors, he could see Mitchell still standing in the lobby, talking to someone, probably bragging about what he'd just done. A bellhop was standing near the entrance, smoking a cigarette. Young kid. Couldn't have been more than 19. He was trying not to look at Bumpy, but his eyes kept darting over. Bumpy walked toward him slowly. The kid's eyes went wide. He stepped back, the cigarette trembling in his hand. "Easy," Bumpy said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The kid relaxed slightly, but he kept his distance. Bumpy looked at the hotel, then back at the kid. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, cold as winter ice. 48 hours, Bumpy said, before the sun sets on Sunday. I'm going to be sitting in that man's chair. I'm going to own this hotel. Every brick, every room, every chandelier. And Gerald Mitchell is going to understand what it means to put his hands on the wrong man. The kid blinked. Then he laughed. Not a mean laugh, just disbelief. "Mister, you can't buy a hotel in 2 days. That's impossible. That's not how it works." Bumpy smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who'd just made a promise he fully intended to keep. "Watch me." He turned and walked away, leaving his luggage scattered on the pavement. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He'd made his promise. Now he just had to keep it. Behind him. The bellhop watched him disappear into the crowd. The kid would remember that moment for the rest of his life. The calm in Bumpy's voice, the certainty, the absolute conviction. Around them, the crowd was already dispersing, people going back to their lives. The businessmen who'd watched went back to their newspapers. Office workers hurried past toward the subway. Within 5 minutes, it was like nothing had happened. A black man humiliated in the street, his belongings thrown around like trash, blood on his face. Nobody cared. Nobody would remember, except Bumpy Johnson. He would remember, and Gerald Mitchell would learn that some men don't forget. What none of them understood, what nobody in that crowd could possibly know, was who Bumpy Johnson actually was. They saw a black man in an expensive suit. They saw someone who could be pushed around, humiliated, thrown into the street. They saw someone powerless. They couldn't have been more wrong. The walk from downtown Manhattan to Harlem took Bumpy 40 minutes. He could have taken a cab. But he needed time to think, time to let the rage settle into something colder, something more useful. Rage was fire. Fire burned hot and fast and left nothing but ash. What Bumpy needed was ice. Ice that lasted. Ice that cut. By the time he reached 125th Street, his mind was clear. The jazz club sat in the basement of a brownstone, anonymous and unmarked. No sign outside. No indication that anything was there except a red light above a plain black door. You had to know where you were going. You had to be invited. This wasn't the kind of place tourists stumbled into. Bumpy walked down the stairs just after midnight. The music hit him like a wave. A quartet. Piano. Bass. Drums. Saxophone. The kind of music that made the walls vibrate and the glasses shake on the tables. The kind of music you felt in your chest before you heard it in your ears. The club was packed. Black folks dressed in their finest. Dancing. Drinking. Living. This was Harlem after dark. This was home. Nobody here would refuse Bumpy service. Nobody here would dare put their hands on him. But Bumpy didn't stop to enjoy the music. He walked straight through the main room to a door in the back. The bouncer, a massive man named Big Sam, nodded and stepped aside without a word. Behind that door was a narrow hallway. At the end of that hallway was another door, and behind that door was a private room that Bumpy used for business that needed to stay invisible. 3 men were already waiting. Marcus Henderson sat closest to the door. Mid-30s, thin, wire-rimmed glasses, dark suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Marcus was an accountant, but not just any accountant. Marcus worked at one of the biggest investment firms downtown. He had access to financial records, bank statements, mortgage documents. He understood how money moved through the city like blood through veins. Marcus owed Bumpy his brother's freedom. 5 years ago. That brother had been arrested for assault. The kid was innocent, but the police didn't care. They needed someone to blame. Bumpy had made calls, applied pressure. The charges disappeared. Marcus never forgot. William Doc Turner sat across from Marcus, smoking a cigarette. Late 40s, graying hair, expensive watch glinting in the dim light. Doc was a criminal defense attorney with a reputation for winning impossible cases. More importantly, Doc understood real estate law. He knew how property changed hands, how ownership could be transferred, obscured, made to appear and disappear like magic tricks. Doc had kept Bumpy out of prison more times than either of them could count. They had an understanding built on mutual benefit and absolute trust. The third man was Vincent Carlyle. White, mid-50s, expensive suit, hair perfectly styled. Face that had probably been handsome 20 years ago, but now just looked tired and calculating. Vincent was a political fixer, the kind of man who knew every politician in New York and had information on most of them. Useful information. Vincent worked with Bumpy because Vincent was practical. He understood that the world was changing. The old racial hierarchy was cracking. Men like Bumpy were rising whether the white establishment liked it or not. Vincent had decided he'd rather be on the winning side. Bumpy closed the door behind him. The music became muffled, distant. He walked to the desk but didn't sit. He stood there for a moment, looking at each man in turn. "The Dixie Hotel," Bumpy said. His voice was calm, controlled. "I want it. I want control within 48 hours. I want the deed transferred. The management changed. And I want Gerald Mitchell to understand what it means to disrespect a man in his own city." Silence filled the room like smoke. Doc spoke first. "Bumpy, that's impossible. Hotels like that don't transfer ownership in 2 days. The legal process alone takes weeks. Even if we had unlimited money right now, the system doesn't move that fast. Then we make it move faster, Bumpy said. Marcus leaned forward. What happened? Bumpy told them. Every detail. The refusal at the front desk. Mitchell's arrival. The shove. The slap that echoed through the lobby. The luggage thrown into the street. The blood. The crowd watching and doing nothing. The bellhop's laughter when Bumpy made his promise. When he finished. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Vincent broke the silence with a low whistle. Mitchell's connected. Bumpy. He's got friends in City Hall. The police commissioner golfs with him every Sunday. You can't just, I can, Bumpy interrupted. And I will. Doc stubbed out his cigarette in the glass ashtray. Do you have any idea what that hotel is worth? The capital needed to even approach this. I know exactly what it's worth. Bumpy reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila folder. He dropped it on the desk with a heavy thud. That's everything on Gerald Mitchell. His finances, his debts, his business dealings, his secrets. Marcus picked up the folder carefully and started flipping through pages. His eyes widened behind his glasses. Jesus. Where did you get all this? I've had people watching Mitchell for 3 years, Bumpy said calmly. Ever since he refused to serve one of my business associates. I knew eventually I'd need this information. Tonight just moved up the timeline. Doc leaned over Marcus's shoulder to look. His jaw dropped. Christ almighty. He's in debt to 3 different banks. The hotel barely makes enough to cover mortgage payments. He's got a mistress in Queens he's paying rent for. There's even a tax investigation that's been quietly ongoing. He's vulnerable, Bumpy said. We just need to apply the right pressure in the right places. Vincent was reading now, too, his finger tracing down columns of numbers. This could actually work. If we play this right, if we move fast enough and stay quiet enough, this could work. So you're in? Bumpy asked. Vincent looked up, met Bumpy's eyes. You understand what you're asking? You're talking about going to war with the entire downtown establishment. Mitchell won't just roll over. His friends won't let this happen without a fight. I didn't ask if it would be easy, Bumpy said quietly. I asked if you're in. Vincent smiled slowly. It was the smile of a gambler who'd just been dealt a winning hand. Hell yes, I'm in. Bumpy turned to Marcus. You. Marcus closed the folder carefully. Mitchell owes money to Morrison at First National Bank. I know Morrison personally. The man's terrified right now. The bank's been carrying bad loans for months, if we approach him correctly. If we can make Mitchell's financial situation look worse than it already is. He paused, thinking through calculations. Yeah, I can make this work. I'm in. Doc was already standing, his mind clearly racing. I'll need to start drawing up paperwork tonight. Shell corporations, investment groups, legal entities that can't be traced directly back to you. This is going to be extremely complicated. Complicated is fine, Bumpy said. Just get it done in 48 hours. They spent the next 2 hours planning every detail. Marcus explained exactly how they could approach the bank. What language to use, what numbers to present. Vincent outlined every politician and journalist he'd need to contact, what strings he'd need to pull. Doc sketched out the legal framework on a yellow notepad, creating layers of corporate structure designed to obscure and protect. Finally, as the night stretched toward morning, they had the skeleton of a plan. That's when Marcus leaned back in his chair and said the words that changed everything. There's one problem. A big one. Everyone stopped, looked at him. Marcus took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Mitchell has protection. Serious protection. Senator McCarthy? Joseph McCarthy. The same McCarthy who's been all over the newspapers going after communists. Mitchell contributed heavily to McCarthy's last campaign. They're friends, golf partners. If McCarthy gets even a whisper that we're targeting Mitchell, he could shut this down with one phone call. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Doc's face had gone pale. If McCarthy's involved, Bumpy, we're not just talking about business anymore. We could end up in prison, or worse. McCarthy doesn't play by any rules. He destroys people for sport. Vincent nodded grimly. McCarthy's on a crusade right now. He's seeing communists everywhere. All he'd need to do is hint that this is some kind of organized conspiracy, and we're done. The FBI would be involved. The media would crucify us. Bumpy listened to all of this without changing expression. Then he walked calmly to the small bar in the corner of the room. He pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 4 glasses. He poured slowly, methodically, the amber liquid catching the light. He brought the glasses back to the desk and handed them out one by one. "McCarthy's a coward," Bumpy said simply. Doc blinked. "What, McCarthy's powerful, but he's a coward at heart. Cowards don't fight battles. They're not certain they can win. If we move fast enough, if we make this look completely legitimate and legal, McCarthy won't get involved. He'll cut Mitchell loose to protect himself." "That's one hell of a gamble," Vincent said. "Everything worth doing is," Bumpy replied. "The question is simple. Are you willing to take the risk?" "Because I am. I gave my word on that street corner tonight. 48 hours. I meant it." The 3 men looked at each other. Then they looked at Bumpy, at the certainty in his eyes, the absolute conviction. Doc raised his glass. "Then we better not waste any more time." Vincent and Marcus raised theirs. Bumpy raised his last to 48 hours and to teaching Gerald Mitchell what real power looks like. They drank. The whiskey burned going down, sharp and clean and final, like a promise sealed in fire. After the others left, Bumpy stayed in the room alone. The music was still playing in the club outside, softer now, a slow blues number about betrayal and revenge, the kind of song that settled into your bones. Bumpy walked to the wall where he'd pinned photographs and documents over the years. Information on dozens of people, politicians, police officers, business owners, anyone who might prove useful someday, anyone who might need to be leveraged or controlled or convinced. In the center was a photograph of Gerald Mitchell, taken 3 years ago at some charity gala. Mitchell in a tuxedo, smiling at the camera with a champagne glass raised, looking like he owned the entire world. Bumpy stared at that photograph for a long moment. Then he pulled it down carefully, walked to the ashtray on the desk, and held the corner of the photo over the flame of his lighter. The photograph caught fire slowly, the flame eating away at Mitchell's face, curling the edges, turning the smile to black ash. Bumpy watched it burn completely, watched Mitchell's image disappear into smoke and nothing, when only ash remained. Bumpy smiled. Tomorrow morning, the real work would begin. Marcus would start making calls to the bank. Doc would begin filing paperwork under false corporate names. Vincent would plant the first seeds of rumor in the right ears, and Gerald Mitchell would wake up not knowing that his entire world was about to collapse. Bumpy walked out of the jazz club just as dawn was breaking over Harlem. The streets were quiet, that peaceful hour between night and morning when the city holds its breath. Big Sam was waiting by the car, looking tired but alert. "Home, boss?" Big Sam asked. Bumpy shook his head. "Office. I need to make some calls before the banks open." As the car pulled away from the curb, Bumpy looked out the window at Harlem waking up. Store owners opening their shops, street cleaners finishing their routes, working people heading to jobs that would never pay them what they were worth. This wasn't just about a hotel anymore. This wasn't just about revenge for being humiliated in a lobby. This was about showing every black person in New York that the system could be beaten. that white men who thought they held all the power could be outmaneuvered, outsmarted, defeated using their own weapons: money, law, strategy. 48 hours. That's all Bumpy had given himself. The clock was already ticking. But the next morning, something happened that nobody had planned for. Something that would test every strategy they'd created. Something that would force Bumpy to make a decision that could destroy everything they'd built in a single night. A phone call was coming. A phone call that would change the entire game. 6 o'clock in the morning. Thursday, March 16th. Marcus Henderson walked through the front doors of First National Bank exactly as the security guard was unlocking them. He wore his usual dark suit, carried his usual leather briefcase, nodded to the guard with his usual polite smile. Everything about him screamed routine. Just another accountant arriving early to get a jump on the day's work. The guard had seen Marcus 100 times before. Never suspected a thing. Marcus took the elevator to the 4th floor where the mortgage department kept their records. He had legitimate access to these files. Part of his job at the investment firm involved reviewing loan portfolios, assessing risk, advising clients on real estate investments. Nobody would question why he was here. But what he was looking for wasn't part of any legitimate business. He found the Dixie Hotel file in the 3rd cabinet he checked. Thick folder. Years of documentation. Marcus pulled it out carefully and carried it to an empty desk in the corner. He opened it and started reading. 10 minutes later, his hands were shaking. The file showed everything. Mitchell's original mortgage from 1947, the refinancing in 1949, the missed payments, the late fees, the warnings from the bank, and right there, in black and white, the current outstanding debt. $340,000. Not $287,000 like the preliminary information suggested. $340,000. The difference was enormous. It meant Mitchell was in even deeper trouble than they'd thought. It meant the bank was carrying even more risk. It meant Morrison, the vice president who handled this account, was probably losing sleep every night worrying about this loan. Marcus pulled out a small camera from his briefcase, the kind intelligence operatives used. Tiny, quiet, efficient. He photographed every page, every number, every signature. 5 minutes later, he had everything he needed. He put the file back exactly where he'd found it, walked out of the building at 6:32, and headed straight to a payphone 3 blocks away. Bumpy answered on the first ring. It's worse than we thought, Marcus said quietly. 340,000. The bank's exposure is massive. Morrison's going to be desperate to unload this. On the other end of the line, Bumpy was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Good. Desperation makes people cooperative. Stay ready. I'll call you in 2 hours." Marcus hung up and looked at his watch. The plan was moving forward. Every piece was falling into place. While Marcus was photographing bank records, Vincent Carlisle was sitting in a coffee shop on 42nd Street across from a man named Robert Chen. Chen was a junior reporter at the New York Times, young, ambitious, hungry for a story that would make his career. Vincent had cultivated their relationship over the past year, feeding Chen small tips that had panned out, building trust. "I've got something for you," Vincent said quietly, stirring his coffee. "But you didn't hear it from me." Chen leaned forward, eyes bright. "What is it?" "The FBI's been quietly investigating the Dixie Hotel. Money laundering. Possible connections to organized crime. They're building a case, but it's not public yet." Chen's pen was already out. "The Dixie that's Gerald Mitchell's place. He's connected to McCarthy, isn't he?" "That's what makes it interesting," Vincent said. "Mitchell's been protected for years, but the FBI doesn't care about political connections when they smell money crimes. Word is they're going to move soon. Search warrants, subpoenas, The whole thing. Can you confirm this? Do you have a source inside the bureau? Vincent smiled. I have sources everywhere. But this needs to be handled carefully. You can't name me. You run this as sources close to the investigation. You understand? Chen nodded eagerly. When can I publish? Today. This afternoon if possible. The story's going to break whether you write it or not. Might as well be the one who breaks it first. They talked for another 15 minutes. Vincent carefully feeding Chen just enough detail to make the story credible, but not so much that it could be easily debunked. By the time Vincent left that coffee shop, he knew exactly what Chen would write, knew exactly what headline would appear in tomorrow's paper, and more importantly, he knew exactly how Mitchell would react when he saw it. By 9 o'clock that morning, the rumor had started spreading through Manhattan's financial district like wildfire. Traders whispered about it over coffee. Bankers mentioned it in morning meetings. The Dixie Hotel was under federal investigation. The FBI was involved. Gerald Mitchell might be facing criminal charges. Nobody knew where the rumor started. Nobody could confirm it. But everybody was talking about it. Mitchell first heard about it at 9:15 when his lawyer called in a panic. Gerald, I'm getting calls from 3 different people asking me about FBI investigations. What the hell is going on? Mitchell's blood went cold. What are you talking about? People are saying the feds are looking into the hotel. Money laundering. Something about organized crime connections. Is any of this true? Of course it's not true. Mitchell shouted into the phone. This is insane. Who's spreading this garbage? I don't know. But you need to shut it down fast. This kind of rumor can destroy you even if it's completely false. Mitchell slammed the phone down. His hands were shaking. FBI investigation for organized crime. This was absurd. He ran a legitimate business. He paid his taxes. Well, most of them. He had friends in City Hall. Connections in Washington. He picked up the phone again and dialed Senator McCarthy's private number, the one McCarthy had given him personally, the one that was supposed to be answered immediately no matter what time of day. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. Mitchell tried again. Same result. He tried McCarthy's office in Washington. A secretary answered, professional and cold. Senator McCarthy is unavailable at this time. May I take a message? This is Gerald Mitchell. The senator knows me personally. I need to speak with him immediately. It's urgent. I understand, Mr. Mitchell, but the senator is in closed meetings all day. I can have him return your call when he's available. When will that be? I really couldn't say, sir. Mitchell hung up, his stomach churning. McCarthy always took his calls. Always. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. But Mitchell didn't know the truth. Couldn't possibly know. McCarthy had indeed received a message about the FBI rumors. A quiet warning from someone in the Justice Department that the Dixie Hotel investigation was real and expanding. McCarthy, always quick to protect himself, had made an instant calculation. Gerald Mitchell wasn't worth the political risk. Not if the feds were really involved. So McCarthy had done what cowards always do. He'd disappeared, cut the connection, left Mitchell to drown alone. By noon, Mitchell had made a decision. If rumors were going to destroy him, he'd fight back with the truth. He'd go public, deny everything, expose this for the smear campaign it obviously was. He called a press conference for 2 o'clock that afternoon. The press conference took place in the Dixie Hotel's main ballroom. Mitchell had pulled together every reporter he could reach on short notice. About 15 showed up, mostly from small papers and local news services. The major papers sent junior reporters. Nobody was treating this as a major story yet. But they would. Mitchell stood at a podium, sweating under the lights, his prepared statement trembling slightly in his hands. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I've called you here today to address vicious rumors that have been circulating about my business and my reputation. These rumors are completely false. They are part of a coordinated attack by criminal elements seeking to intimidate honest businessmen. He paused, looking out at the bored faces. This wasn't going how he'd hoped. Specifically, there have been allegations of FBI investigations, organized crime connections, financial improprieties, all lies, all designed to damage my reputation and my business. And I believe I know who's behind it. Now the reporters were paying attention. Pens came out. Cameras started clicking. 2 days ago, a man named Ellsworth Johnson, known as Bumpy Johnson, attempted to secure a room at this hotel. Mr. Johnson is a known criminal figure from Harlem with connections to illegal gambling, racketeering, and organized crime. When I refused to allow him to use my establishment for his criminal activities, he became violent and threatening. He vowed revenge. Now suddenly, these rumors appear. I believe this is part of an organized conspiracy by the Black Mafia to intimidate and potentially seize control of legitimate white-owned businesses in Manhattan. The room exploded. Every reporter was shouting questions at once. Mitchell felt a surge of satisfaction. He'd done it. He'd turned this around, made himself the victim, made Bumpy the villain. He had no idea he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Within an hour, the police had picked up Bumpy Johnson for questioning. 2 detectives showed up at his Harlem office at 3:30 in the afternoon, polite but firm. "Mr. Johnson, we need you to come down to the station, answer some questions about Gerald Mitchell and the Dixie Hotel." Bumpy didn't resist, didn't argue. He simply smiled, stood up, and said, "Of course, officers, happy to cooperate." The interrogation room was exactly what you'd expect. Gray walls, metal table, uncomfortable chairs, mirror that was obviously two-way glass. 2 detectives sat across from Bumpy, senior guys, veterans. They knew who they were dealing with. "Mr. Johnson, Gerald Mitchell has made some serious allegations against you. He says you threatened him, that you're part of an organized conspiracy to take over his business." Bumpy looked genuinely puzzled. "Threatened him, I don't understand. I simply tried to rent a room at his hotel. He refused service and had me physically removed. I left peacefully. He says you vowed revenge, that you told one of his employees you'd own the hotel within 48 hours. I may have said something like that in the heat of the moment. After being assaulted and humiliated, I was angry. But saying something and doing something are very different. Have I committed any crime?" The detectives glanced at each other. "Where were you yesterday morning between 6 and noon?" Bumpy smiled. "At church, actually. The Abyssinian Baptist Church on 138th Street. I attend services there every Wednesday morning. You can ask Reverend Clayton. He'll confirm I was there from 7 until 11. Then I had lunch with members of the congregation. At least 20 people saw me. And yesterday afternoon, in meetings at my office, with my lawyer, my accountant, and several business associates. All completely legitimate business." "What kind of business?" "Real estate investment, community development. I'm involved in several projects in Harlem aimed at improving housing and business opportunities for Black residents." 6 hours. They questioned Bumpy for 6 solid hours, asked the same questions different ways, tried to trip him up, catch him in a contradiction. But Bumpy's story never changed, never wavered. And every detail checked out. His alibi was perfect, ironclad, unbreakable. At 9:30 that evening, they had to let him go. Bumpy walked out of the police station into a crowd of reporters. Word had spread about Mitchell's press conference and Bumpy's detention. 20 journalists were waiting with cameras and microphones. "Mr. Johnson," Do you have a response to Gerald Mitchell's allegations? Bumpy stopped on the steps, looked at the cameras. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, and absolutely devastating. I went to the Dixie Hotel as a paying customer. I had money. I was respectful. I was refused service solely because of the color of my skin. When I objected, I was physically assaulted and thrown into the street. My question is simple. I wanted to rent a room. They refused. Who exactly is the criminal here? The cameras flashed. The questions came faster. But Bumpy just smiled, got into his car, and drove away. By the time the morning papers hit the streets, the story had completely flipped. Mitchell wasn't the victim anymore. He was the racist hotel owner who'd assaulted a man and then tried to use criminal allegations to cover it up. Public opinion was shifting. Fast. But Mitchell wasn't the only one feeling pressure. That same night, while Bumpy was being questioned, 3 other things happened almost simultaneously. At 7:15, Marcus Henderson was walking to his car in the parking garage near his office when 3 men appeared from behind a concrete pillar. They wore masks, carried pipes. They didn't say a word. They just attacked. Marcus went down hard, felt ribs crack, tasted blood. The beating lasted maybe 30 seconds, but felt like an hour. Then the men ran. Left Marcus bleeding on the concrete floor. A security guard found him 10 minutes later and called an ambulance. At 8 o'clock, Doc Turner opened his mail at home. Inside a plain envelope was a single bullet. No note, no explanation. Just a bullet. The message was clear. At 8:45, Vincent Carlisle received a phone call at his office. Official voice. Federal credentials. Mr. Carlisle, this is Agent Morrison from the FBI. We need you to come in for questioning regarding your involvement with Ellsworth Johnson and potential criminal conspiracy. Vincent's hands went cold. When? Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Don't be late. By midnight, all 3 men had contacted Bumpy, Marcus from his hospital bed. Ribs taped, face swollen, Doc from his home, doors locked, lights off. Vincent from a payphone, paranoid about wiretaps. The message was the same from all of them. This is getting dangerous. Maybe we should back off, regroup, try a different approach. Bumpy listened to each of them, didn't interrupt, didn't argue, just listened. Then he said the same thing to all 3. No, we don't back off. We accelerate when the enemy gets desperate. They make mistakes, and desperate people destroy themselves. Bumpy, I'm in the hospital, Marcus said. They could have killed me. But they didn't, because killing you would bring heat they can't afford. This was intimidation. It means we're winning. The FBI wants to question me, Vincent said. If they start digging into our arrangement, let them dig. Bumpy interrupted. Everything we're doing is legal. Complicated, but legal. Answer their questions. Be cooperative. Give them nothing to work with. They sent me a bullet. Bumpy, Doc said quietly. A bullet in the mail. I know. And tomorrow, we send them something worse. We send them the truth that they can't stop this, that we're going to win. There was silence on the other end of each call. Then, one by one, they agreed. But what none of them knew, what Bumpy hadn't told them yet, was that everything that had just happened was exactly what he'd planned. The next morning, Friday, Bumpy called an emergency meeting, not at the jazz club. Too obvious, too easy to surveil. Instead, he chose a church basement in Harlem. 10 o'clock in the morning, neutral ground. All 3 men showed up. Marcus in a wheelchair, face bruised purple and yellow. Doc looking exhausted, jumping at every sound. Vincent chain-smoking, hands shaking slightly. Bumpy stood in front of them, calm as ever. "Everything that happened last night was theater," he said simply. They stared at him. "Marcus, you weren't attacked by Mitchell's people. You were attacked by 3 men I hired, professional stunt performers who knew exactly how to make it look real without causing permanent damage. The hospital confirmed broken ribs. Yes, but controlled breaks. Painful but not dangerous." Marcus's jaw dropped. You hired people to beat me up." "I needed it to look real. I needed the police report. I needed the hospital records. I needed proof that Mitchell was escalating to violence. And I needed public sympathy. You could have told me. If you'd known, your reaction wouldn't have been genuine. The doctors needed to believe you were a real assault victim. The police needed to believe it. The newspapers needed to believe it. Everyone needed to believe it, including Mitchell." Bumpy turned to Doc. "The bullet in your mail, I sent it. From an untraceable address." "Again, I needed documentation. You filed a police report, correct?" Doc nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "And Vincent," Bumpy continued, "there is no Agent Morrison at the FBI. That was one of my people using a borrowed office and fake credentials. He's going to call you this morning and cancel the meeting. Apologize for the confusion. Wrong Vincent Carlisle." Vincent stubbed out his cigarette. "Jesus Christ, Bumpy. I needed Mitchell to think he was winning. I needed him to believe that intimidation tactics were working. Because when people think they're winning, they get overconfident. They make mistakes. They expose themselves." Marcus wheeled himself closer. "This whole thing was a setup from the beginning." "Not the whole thing. Mitchell really did assault me. That was real. But everything since then, controlled chaos. We're not reacting to Mitchell. We're making him react to us, and every reaction reveals more about his vulnerabilities." "What about the FBI rumors?" Vincent asked. "Those are spreading everywhere." "Let them spread. Mitchell's trying to deny them, which makes him look guilty. His friends are distancing themselves, which makes him look isolated. And the bank is watching all of this and getting more nervous by the hour." Right on cue. Bumpy's phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, then smiled. "Gentlemen, that was my contact at First National. Morrison wants to meet. Today, 4:30 this afternoon. He's ready to talk about options for the Dixie Hotel mortgage." The room went silent. They'd done it. In less than 48 hours, they'd pushed a major Manhattan bank to the negotiating table. "Now comes the hard part," Bumpy said. "We need $340,000, and we need it in 4 hours." At 4:30 that afternoon, Marcus Henderson and Vincent Carlisle sat in Morrison's office at First National Bank. The office was all dark wood and leather chairs, the kind of place designed to intimidate. Morrison sat behind his massive desk, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Gentlemen," Morrison began carefully, "I appreciate you coming on such short notice. The bank is, as you might imagine, concerned about our position with the Dixie Hotel." "We understand," Marcus said smoothly. "That's why we're here. We may be in a position to resolve this situation in a way that benefits everyone." Morrison's eyes sharpened with interest. "How much are we talking about?" Vincent slid an envelope across the desk. "That's a cashier's check for $340,000. Full payment of the outstanding mortgage balance." Morrison opened the envelope, stared at the check. His hands actually trembled slightly as he held it. Where did this come from?" "A consortium of investors," Marcus said. 47 separate individuals, to be exact. All legitimate businessmen, all interested in Manhattan real estate, all willing to pool resources for this opportunity. 47 investors. Morrison looked skeptical. "That's highly unusual." These are unusual circumstances, Vincent said. The investors prefer to remain anonymous, but I can assure you every dollar is clean, legal, and traceable. We can provide documentation for each contribution. Morrison set the check down carefully. This would resolve the bank's exposure completely. We'd transfer the mortgage to your investment group. Mitchell would still own the physical property, but you'd control the debt. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. And if Mitchell defaults, which seems increasingly likely given the current situation, your group would have the right to foreclose and take ownership. That's standard procedure with any mortgage transfer. Morrison was silent for a long moment. Outside his window, Manhattan continued its endless rhythm. Cars honking, people rushing, the city that never stopped moving. I need to see the documentation, Morrison said finally. Verification of fund sources, background checks on the investors. This needs to be completely above board. Of course, Vincent said. We have everything prepared. You'll have complete transparency. Morrison looked at the check again. $340,000. His problem solved. His risk eliminated. His career saved. If everything checks out, Morrison said slowly, we could have this finalized by close of business today. That would be ideal, Marcus said. What Morrison didn't know was that the 47 investors were real. Real names, real money, real businessmen. What he didn't know was that every single one of them was black. Doctors, lawyers, shop owners, landlords. Men who'd been pooling their money in Harlem for years, waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. Men who'd been organized by Bumpy Johnson specifically for this moment. At 4:52, Morrison signed the transfer documents. The mortgage for the Dixie Hotel officially changed hands. The bank was paid in full. The risk was gone. And Gerald Mitchell had no idea what had just happened. At exactly 5 o'clock, a messenger delivered an envelope to Mitchell's office at the Dixie Hotel. Official bank letterhead. Legal documents inside. Mitchell opened it with shaking hands. The words seemed to swim on the page. Notice of mortgage transfer. Change of creditor. New terms and conditions. His mortgage had been sold. To an investment group he'd never heard of. The bank hadn't even told him. Hadn't asked permission. Had just sold his debt to strangers. Mitchell grabbed his phone and called Morrison. Got voicemail. Called again. Voicemail again. Called the main bank line. I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell, but Mr. Morrison has left for the day. You can try reaching him Monday morning. Mitchell looked at his watch. 5:15. He tried McCarthy's number again. Straight to voicemail. Tried McCarthy's office in Washington. Senator McCarthy is traveling and unavailable. Would you like to leave a message? Tell him Gerald Mitchell called. Tell him it's urgent. Tell him I need to speak with him immediately. I'll pass along the message, sir. Mitchell sat in his office as the sun set over Manhattan. Around him, his hotel continued operating. Guests checking in and out. Staff working their shifts. Everything normal. Everything the same. Except nothing was the same anymore. Mitchell stood up suddenly and grabbed his coat. He needed to see McCarthy in person. Needed to make him understand what was happening. McCarthy had a townhouse on the Upper East Side. Mitchell would go there right now. Demand to be let in. Demand answers. He drove across town in his Cadillac, heart pounding, hands gripping the wheel too tight. The townhouse was dark when he arrived. No lights in the windows, no car in the driveway. Mitchell rang the doorbell, pounded on the door, shouted McCarthy's name. A neighbor came out, annoyed. He's not there. Left this morning with suitcases. Said something about Canada. Now keep it down or I'm calling the police. Canada. McCarthy had fled to Canada. Mitchell stood on the empty street. The truth finally sinking in. McCarthy had abandoned him. The bank had sold his debt. The FBI rumors were spreading. His friends were vanishing. He was alone. Mitchell drove back to the Dixie in a daze, parked in his reserved spot, walked through the employee entrance, took the back stairs to his office. The building was quiet now. After midnight, just the night staff working. Mitchell locked his office door behind him, turned off the lights, sat in his chair in the darkness. From his desk drawer, he pulled out a revolver. Old. Heavy. He'd kept it there for years. For protection, he'd always told himself. For emergencies. He set it on the desk in front of him, looked at it in the dim light coming through the window. It would be easy. One bullet. And all of this. The humiliation. The fear. The knowledge that he'd been outmaneuvered by a man he'd considered beneath him. His hand reached for the gun, picked it up. The metal was cold against his palm. He raised it slowly, pressed the barrel against his temple, and then he started crying. Great, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. The first tears he'd shed since he was a child. Since before he'd learned that men don't cry. That power means never showing weakness. But there was no one here to see. No one to judge. Just Gerald Mitchell alone in the dark with a gun in the ruins of everything he'd built. He cried for 20 minutes. Then he lowered the gun, set it back on the desk, wiped his eyes with shaking hands. He wouldn't do it. Couldn't do it. He was a coward. Yes, but he was a coward who wanted to live, even if living meant facing what was coming next. Mitchell sat there in the darkness until dawn started breaking over the city. Gray light creeping across the floor. Birds starting to sing outside. At 6:30 in the morning, he stood up, straightened his rumpled suit, washed his face in the private bathroom attached to his office, looked at himself in the mirror. The man looking back was older than he remembered. Tired, defeated, but still breathing. Mitchell took a deep breath, unlocked his office door, and walked down the stairs toward the hotel lobby. He had no plan, no strategy, no idea what he was going to do. He just knew he needed to see his hotel one more time. While it was still his, the lobby was quiet. The night shift ending, the morning shift starting. Everything routine, everything normal. Mitchell walked to the center of the lobby, looked around at the marble floors he'd chosen, the chandeliers he'd installed, the paintings on the walls, the grand staircase, all of it. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. Sitting in one of the leather chairs near the fireplace, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee, was Bumpy Johnson. The man looked up, met Mitchell's eyes, and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell," Bumpy said calmly. "We need to talk." Mitchell stood frozen in the center of the lobby. His heart hammered against his ribs. His mouth had gone dry. The man who'd humiliated him, thrown him into the street just 3 days ago, was sitting in his hotel like he owned the place. And the terrible truth was, he basically did. Bumpy set down his newspaper carefully. The coffee cup in his hand wasn't steaming anymore. He'd been sitting there a while, waiting. "Sit down, Mr. Mitchell," Bumpy said quietly. It wasn't a request. Mitchell's legs carried him forward without conscious thought. He sat in the chair across from Bumpy. Up close, he could see how calm the man was, how absolutely certain. There was no anger in those eyes, no triumph, just quiet inevitability. "Why?" Mitchell's voice came out as a whisper. "Why didn't you just kill me?" Bumpy smiled slightly. "I don't kill people, Mr. Mitchell. I kill systems. Systems that say a man's worth is measured by the color of his skin. Systems that let men like you put their hands on men like me without consequences. Those systems need to die. You're just a man. Men I can work with. Mitchell felt something break inside him. What do you want? I want you to understand something very clearly, Bumpy said, leaning forward. You have two choices. The first choice is you resign as manager today. You walk away with your dignity intact. 6 months' salary. A reference letter saying you handled this transition professionally. You disappear quietly and start over somewhere else. And the second choice. You stay and watch me dismantle everything you built. I integrate this hotel completely. Black guests in every room. Black staff in every position. I turn your legacy into proof that the old world is dying. Your name becomes synonymous with the man who tried to hold back progress and failed. Mitchell looked down at his hands. They were shaking. That's not really two choices. No, Bumpy agreed. It's not. But I'm giving you the illusion of choice because I'm not a cruel man. I could destroy you completely. Instead, I'm offering you an exit. The lobby was starting to wake up around them. Early morning guests heading to breakfast, staff preparing for the day shift. Normal operations continuing while two men sat in leather chairs deciding the fate of everything. Mitchell thought about the gun in his office drawer. Thought about McCarthy fleeing to Canada. Thought about 48 hours ago when he'd felt powerful and secure. I'll resign, he said finally. Today. Bumpy stood and extended his hand. Mitchell stared at it for a long moment. Then he stood and shook it. The handshake was brief, professional, final. One more thing, Bumpy said. When you leave here today, you leave behind the hate, the bitterness, the belief that you were right and I was wrong. Because you weren't right. Mr. Mitchell, you were just powerful. And power without wisdom is just violence waiting to happen. Mitchell nodded. He couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. He turned and walked toward the elevator. Didn't look back. Rode up to his office for the last time. Packed his personal items into a box. The photographs on his desk. The awards on his wall. The gun in his drawer, which he left behind. 30 minutes later, Gerald Mitchell walked out of the Dixie Hotel carrying a cardboard box and nothing else. Within a week, the transformation began. Bumpy didn't just take over the hotel. He reimagined it completely. The name changed first. The Dixie became the Victory Hotel. New sign, new letterhead, new identity. Then came the hiring. 15 black employees moved into management positions in the first week. Front desk managers, housekeeping supervisors, kitchen staff. People who'd never been allowed past the service entrance now ran departments. The white staff who stayed learned quickly that the new boss meant business. Integration wasn't optional. Respect wasn't negotiable. You served every guest equally, or you found work elsewhere. By the end of the first month, the Victory Hotel had achieved 94% occupancy. The highest in its history. Black travelers who'd never had access to downtown Manhattan hotels flooded in. Business travelers, politicians, entertainers, people with money who'd been excluded from white establishments suddenly had options. The hotel became profitable in ways Mitchell had never imagined. Other hotels noticed. Within the first year, 8 other Manhattan establishments quietly dropped their segregation policies. Not out of moral conviction, out of economic necessity. They were losing business to the Victory. The Victory Hotel became more than a business. It became a symbol. Proof that integration wasn't just morally right, but financially smart. Proof that black dollars spent just as well as white ones. Bumpy Johnson had changed Manhattan without firing a single shot. 16 years later. In 1968, Ellsworth Raymond Johnson died peacefully in his sleep. Heart attack. Quick and painless. He was 62 years old. The funeral was held at the Abyssinian Baptist Church. 10,000 people came to pay their respects. The line stretched for blocks, rich and poor, black and white, politicians, business owners, people whose lives Bumpy had touched in ways big and small. Among them was an old man in a cheap suit, bent and gray. He waited in line for 2 hours just to stand in front of the casket for 30 seconds. Gerald Mitchell looked down at Bumpy's peaceful face and whispered words no one else could hear. "You taught me how to live. I just wish I'd learned sooner." He turned and walked away, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Today, in 2024, the Victory Hotel still stands on the corner of 47th and Broadway. The building has been renovated multiple times, but the bronze plaque in the lobby remains unchanged. Bumpy Johnson, the man who changed Manhattan with intelligence, not violence. On a Tuesday afternoon in February, a young black man in an expensive suit walks through the front doors. Confident, head high, he approaches the desk. "I'd like to book the presidential suite. 2 nights. The clerk, a young woman with bright eyes, smiles warmly. "Of course, sir. May I have your name?" No hesitation, no phone calls to managers, no nervous glances, just service, just respect, just humanity. The young man doesn't know the story, doesn't know about Mitchell or the slap or the 48 hours that changed everything. He just knows he can walk into any hotel in Manhattan and be treated like the human being he is. That's the real power, not the kind that announces itself with guns and threats. The kind that whispers through generations, the kind that changes systems so completely that people forget the systems were ever different. That's what Bumpy Johnson understood. Real power doesn't destroy, it transforms. It builds something so strong, so inevitable, that it outlasts everyone who tried to stop it. The young man takes his key and heads toward the elevator. Behind him, the hotel continues its rhythm. Guests coming and going, staff working, life happening. And somewhere, in the architecture of the building itself, in the policies that govern it, in the simple fact of its existence, Bumpy Johnson's legacy whispers on. Not a shout, not a threat, just a quiet, eternal truth. This is how you change the world, not with violence, with vision, with patience, with the absolute certainty that the future belongs to those smart enough to build it.